All right. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to The Hypothesis. This is a very cool and unique opportunity and a time to present something that has been under examination, scrutiny, research for almost 2 solid years. And while alluded to previously, it's now time to present the entire hypothesis as it exists currently. And we have split this into 4 parts. The first being the introduction today. You probably have never heard such a thing before. Number one, I'd like to thank my research partner, Taryn. You can find her at Madam Rex on the X platform. She's so valuable. Her help, feedback, and assistance in everything that you're about to hear. And so I look forward to continuing this journey with her and with all of you. You can find me on the X platform right there, Mantei4, Mantei4, for daily interaction. Okay, number one. What is behind the UFO phenomenon? That is the question. That is what drove this hypothesis, which you're about to hear. Number one, what is this really and what is it not? Why isn't it called a theory? I'm sticking with the very strict tradition of science on these terms. Where a hypothesis basically is just an idea you can throw out there and test and see if it's turned out to be testable or true, or maybe partially true, or you're on the right track, things of that nature. Whereas a theory is more fleshed out and you've tested it and it stands up to the tests, to the scrutiny, to what you think is going to happen actually does happen, or what you are proposing actually does exist, or it exhibits, return on what you're expecting to see or to measure. So it really is a theory in that way. However, it's not testable at this time. It's not testable at this time because the phenomenon, as it's colloquially called, is not allowing it to be tested at this time. And those of us in the normal world, whether it be governments or organizations and so forth, or as individuals, we don't have all the information for everyone to look at that would provide for testing or verification, viability, questioning further. Okay, so with that understood, that's why we're calling it a hypothesis. As a Christian man, that's my worldview. The reflexive, common theories about this UFO phenomenon don't sit well with me. They don't sit well as a Christian, and they don't sit well as a person who just wants the truth, because the truth always matters. That's what I am after. That's what I think we're all after, right? What is true? That's a Christian ethos. And so nothing that is true could possibly contradict if I believe God is my Father and Jesus is the Son of God and he died for my sins, he rose from the dead, the Holy Spirit is with us. Like all that, none of that would conflict if something is true. So the two common reflexive theories are extraterrestrials on one side and demons on the other. If you ask an average, a Christian who's into their Bible and serious about their faith, usually the response is something along the lines of it's demonic. Some people say angels, but it's in that angel and demon realm, and that's all it is, and they already have decided on that. Versus the other end of it, which is the New Age side, basically. Again, there's exceptions to this, of course, but it's obviously extraterrestrial. It's obviously some other life form from somewhere else in the universe that's not from our planet. And because we see these things, and obviously they're so far beyond what we have as a society, it's got to be some other form of life, some other civilization. And there's lots of, structure around that belief. And it's been going on for a long time, for decades and decades. So the truth matters, right? So personally, I did not begin this journey of coming up with the best impression about what actually is happening. I didn't throw anything out. I left it all on the table. I said, okay, well, I'm willing to accept ETs, demons, or everything in between. That's crypto-terrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, you name it. Time traveling, you name it. All of it. I said, I just want to know what the truth is. So this is the best understanding that I could glean after all that. So I'm not against anything by nature. I'm not for anything by nature. I just want the best of our ability to understand what is really happening. Some assumptions coming in are transmedium, what we would call UFOs, UAPs, whatever shape they come in. There are various shapes and various mediums. In other words, in space, in the sky, the upper atmosphere, the lower atmosphere, in your house, in the water, and even underground. All of this has been witnessed and claimed. So I'm assuming that whatever those are, and whoever's behind that, those things are real. That's assumption number one. And corollary to that is they have been around for a long time, at least 100 years, probably far longer. So again, now we start to branch off into people's theories and things where 1947, while being a major year for the phenomenon being noticed or being experienced by many people and coming into our collective imagination or consciousness, or just knowing that it's a thing, while that you might argue started in 1947, it goes way before that. So we can't use that as a starting point. And things that may or may not have been done in the other realms of folks trying to summon this and that or whatever, it was just way older than that. So I'm going on 100 years plus of experience and assuming that this has been happening for that long. Second assumption is that experiencers, however you want to think of that term, someone who has experienced a UFO or a visitation or something along those lines, are telling the truth. Not all of them have, granted, but if they are claiming that, I'm not going to assume they're making it up. And now we've gone many, many decades of actual, verifiable, multi-witness situations where, it's kind of similar over and over and over, and these people don't know each other and there's no connection point at all, but yet certain things are happening again and again. So that brings it up to the level of, well, I don't know if what they understand happened to them is the truth, but to know that something did, or to assume that something actually real did happen, is what I'm referring to. So that's assumption number two. They're having a real experience. Whether they understand it all or not, whether they're getting the true information, whether they're remembering it accurately and all that, I'm not saying any of that, but that the experience itself is a real thing. They're not making it up. There's no cashing in. There's no ulterior motive. That legitimate experiencers are legitimate people with legitimate things happening. Now, would you classify me as one of them? It depends who you ask. But I've seen 2 UFOs in my life. One as a small child, and one last year. One was a light in the sky at night, and one was a metallic-looking sphere hanging out over a highway. And in the recent case, it just was there, and then it just wasn't. So I don't have any good explanation for that, but I'm one of the people who've seen it. And many people are good with these assumptions who've never seen anything. But some folks have, and more than that, they've experienced things that are not pleasant. The abduction scenarios, experimentations, things of this nature, not fun, not cool, not good, but they too have to be believed as having a legitimate something happening. Okay, so those are the assumptions. Many times once we start forming opinions and hypotheses and theories, we tend to settle into a category of it's either nuts and bolts, in other words, physical crafts and bodies, just like from another civilization, and that's all it is. And we don't know how it all works, but that's what it is. Versus the woo, what we call the woo, okay, the stuff that blows our mind, like what is happening, how is this possible? I'm not talking about just about how these vehicles or whatever they are traveling, which is almost to that level, but all the associated experiences from the beings and the connections with our minds and getting instant knowledge and downloads of information that you have no ability to get on your own, and poof, it's there. I mean, there's 1,000 examples of this, of what we would call woo. It's a false choice, is what we have come to the conclusion of. You can't separate them. It's both. There's aspects of both. And again, there's a great literature on this, like the physical craft side of it versus the more spiritual experience or the woo stuff. You've got different, very famous authors and researchers on both sides. If you don't know who they are, we're going to talk about that more at the end and when we write this up afterwards. And finally, don't conflate spiritual things with invisible things. That's a major theme that kept coming up over and over the past 2 years, which is for myself and for the audience and for people who are looking into these things. So often, we would equate, especially the Christian side, something that's invisible with something that is spiritual. I've got to push back on that very strongly. Viruses are invisible to our naked eyes. Gravity is invisible, but we know they're real, and they're not spiritual beings. And they're not spiritual powers. Nothing spiritual about them. They're just things we can't see. And there's many, many more examples. Those are just easy to imagine. Like, oh, okay, yeah. Can't see them doesn't mean they're spiritual things. So we may be seeing a complex technology, for example, that would make something invisible, like a flying saucer. Oh, it's there, poof, it's gone. Like my example with my own sighting. It just wasn't there. It was, and then it wasn't. So if there's a complex technology to make something invisible, or as we were saying, a human brain abilities, whether you call it psychic or whatever, or automatic knowledge of certain things, which are inherently invisible, are not necessarily spirit. Right? My thoughts, or the waves that and the technology that is bringing my sound and voice and picture to you on your phone or your device, your computer, whatever, those things are invisible. Wi-Fi is invisible, but it's not a spiritual thing. Okay, point made. All right, so what exactly have we determined? What is this hypothesis? We are proposing that the UFO phenomenon are not explained by the conventional theories of extraterrestrial life or by spiritual entities. In other words, what we commonly refer to as angels and demons. And whatever kind of angel you want, fallen or otherwise. Those are not what we see is happening. But instead, we are proposing that what you are seeing is connected to a hidden civilization of advanced human beings. These humans descended from those who received forbidden knowledge from what you would term the fallen angels in Genesis chapter 6 in ancient times. They are either those original people who are cheating death or the descendants of those people. People have been and may still right now be using advanced technology to deceive the public and pursue a long-term agenda. This hypothesis draws on many things, including biblical accounts, which I just said, particularly from Genesis 6, but also the book of Enoch and other scriptures, as well as historical research, data, and testimony from both the past and the present, because it's ongoing. And the further we go along, the better data, recordings, videos, etc. It suggests, this hypothesis, that these beings that are behind the UFO phenomenon, not just the vehicles or whatever we're seeing in our skies and oceans, etc., not just that, but what is behind them, those beings are not aliens and are not spiritual entities, but advanced human beings with a nefarious plan. That is the baseline of what we're working from. The introduction to this hypothesis, I don't know how it's going to rub people. I don't know how the response will be or what the response will be. Don't really care. Other than, again, this is not to be original or different. This is not to split some kind of non-existent, baby, as it were. It's because of what seems to be the evidence and data. For example, and we're going to wrap this up with this thought. Why is it, number one, if it's an alien race, why do they look exactly like us? I mean, every being that we see, even if they're more animalistic, or your current, your typical gray, or even a mantid, or some kind of lizard form, or something else, or a tall white, right, or Nordic, and we're going to get into all those in these next sections, but everything looks like a human being, anthropomorphically, right? 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, some kind of central trunk, body, and most, if not all, have some kind of eyes, nose, mouth, ears, even if maybe they don't have visible ears or mouth or something, but basically it's the same look. That doesn't compute for something that's a million light years away. Number 2, why there's interest in people, because that seems to be the conclusion that we're reaching. The interest isn't in the planet I just don't see that. I mean, I hear claims, we hear the theories about that, but I don't see the evidence of that. I don't see that they care enough to stop nuclear detonations. For example, that's another theory. They're concerned about the planet from being destroyed by nuclear weapons. Like, okay, but ask the Japanese that. What about conventional warfare? They don't care about that. Biological weapons? The millions upon millions upon millions upon millions who have been killed just in this century, the past 100 years, this frame that we're working on. We know the UFO phenomenon has been here that long, and this is the most deadly, perversely wanton, murderous era in human history. Millions after millions after millions. You think they care about genocide? Ask the Jews. Or a bunch of different groups in Africa. Or again, and I mean, it's replete with human on human cruelty. So if their end game, which we're going to get to in the final section called the end game, if the end game of this intelligence behind the UFO phenomenon has to do with saving humanity or some kind of evolution of the species, they are horribly failing. And frankly, they're failing at making themselves known. And that's a big part of all of this, which is that the intentionality of staying hidden and being in secret. I will address that more in part 2. All right, my friends, it is now time for part 2 of the hypothesis, Nephilim to Babel. And this is where it gets really interesting, at least for me, when putting this together and with my research partner. As a Christian, this is a big deal. And this could be the keystone or just the key to unlock this whole situation. I think, for me, this is what gives the hypothesis real credibility, in my opinion. So let's get right to it. As we said in part 1, in the introduction, that we should not assume much of anything, and that we can't really separate what you would call nuts and bolts physical objects from the more high strangeness, a more unexplainable, more quote unquote spiritual or supernatural looking aspects, or the woo, as the folks say nowadays. We can't really separate those out. It's a false choice. And as a corollary of that, we, especially us Christians who want to discern things properly, hopefully even if you're not, you want to discern this thing properly, we can't conflate something that's invisible. Just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's a spiritual thing. Doesn't mean it's a spiritual entity just because you can't see it. Or spiritual, some kind of deception just because you can't observe it with your eyes. Or if it comes in and out of your eyesight, it's there and it's not there, etc. Doesn't mean it's a spiritual thing at all. There are many things that we can't see that we know has nothing to do with angels or demons or God, per se, like gravity. like things that are too small, you can't see even hardly with a microscope, but we know they're real. But they're definitely not spiritual, right? So if you had something like a very complex technology to make something invisible, or even abilities of the mind, of things that we don't understand yet about even ourselves or the world around us or how the universe operates, they are inherently possibly invisible, but they are not spiritual. Okay, so we would do well to remember that. All right, here's what we're going to cover in this. If you don't know what these terms are, it's easy enough to find out. When the term Nephilim is the Hebrew word where in Genesis chapter 6, you also see this in the book of Enoch, but a couple places in the Old Testament, but really started in Genesis chapter 6, where you have offspring, you have children of what is termed usually in your Bible there, the sons of God. Those are fallen angels, and they created children with human women. Now, how consensual that was, we don't know. How exactly that worked, we don't know. But the fact is that children were created and that they were giant, much larger people, but human nonetheless. And so they were not, it was not a great situation when they came on the scene. But that is what you would call a Nephal or Nephalim. The Nephal word could mean either fallen or aggressive, like a bully, or that's why the Bible would say mighty men of old or renown. In other words, famous. They were famous people even down through the ages. People still remember that those things are real. They existed, and that they caused a lot of havoc and trouble on the earth. Those are the Nephilim. And what's Babel? Babel is what you normally would say Babylon. But this is the location in Iraq today, near, well, we don't know exactly where it was, but we know it was, the Bible says, like the plains of Shinar, basically the deserts of Iraq. And there was a very famous incident there as well with a bunch of human beings who have assembled together to do something that God did not want done, that he had to put a stop to by getting them to stop communicating to each other, right? The confusion of speech or the confusion of communication between one another is why it is called Babylon. The Babel meaning to confuse. So that's where God confused the language, as you see in Genesis 11. But that whole period is crucial to this hypothesis, because it's not just that these fallen ones, these fallen angels, okay, these sons of God in Genesis 6, it's not just that they came and created children called the Nephilim or the giants or whatever. And by the way, you could say, well, if they were famous people that had reputations and they were really violent and aggressive and bullying and, you know, all that stuff, yeah, you can make a case that those were what you would base the mythologies of the ancient world on, like the Greek gods, the pantheons of things. You could say has to do with them, and you had to be on the right track. But we have those, not only the creations, however, it's not just about that. In fact, if we, both in Genesis 6 and in Enoch, we find the real problem was not just those beings, was not just those super giant humans that these fallen angels created with women or by impregnated women. But it was the result of them. It was the great wickedness and darkness and violence and evil that came because of that. That was the problem. That was the main issue. And Enoch as well. And we're going to read a bit of it today. And what we have in common, both with the Nephilim era, the fallen angels, and the human beings that came from that, is that they didn't just make children, they actually taught secret knowledge or forbidden knowledge, some kind of knowledge that wasn't known to humanity, to people. Direct from angels to people. So the Nephilim, in that, they kind of were not part of that equation. That's important. So they created these children, but also they taught this knowledge directly to non-Nephilim people. Why? That's my question, number one. Why? You should be asking that as well. In the Tower of Babel situation, you also have, and we're going to get into more of this when we publish it in a full write-up as well, but to see in the text, in the biblical text of the Tower of Babel, that again, it's when God says nothing shall be withholden from them, they're something like that. If we continue to allow them to build this tower, that's a huge statement. That's not just, they're building a really tall building, let's mess them up so they don't all live together. That's not what happened at all. Something much, much larger was going on, much more profound. And so we should look at that. And what we come to essentially is you have, again, hidden or forbidden knowledge being not only taught to human beings, but now the human beings begin to use it. And whatever this tower was, it was being used for a purpose to advance this knowledge. And it was, you don't want to say threatening to God, but it was definitely not part of the plan, where this is not okay. And God had to put a stop to it directly. That's a big deal. And you just should perk us up into thinking, what sort of hidden secret knowledge, what were they trying to do exactly? How advanced were they getting, basically? Or what were they knowing that was such a big deal? So what we're going to see, I think, is a largely unnoticed history of this cosmic war. And I say cosmic because it's the size of it. From Genesis 6 through 11. So not just the Tower of Babel in that situation, but all the way back to the fallen angels, and how the enemies of God, so it's a war, so you've got God on the other side, how the enemies of God made plans and executed those plans. And again, we can't, the enemies of God, that must mean Satan and angels and other things. Humans, the Nephilim themselves, but also human beings. 99.9% of history and the scriptures are about God and humans being evil and humans being the enemies of God. That's why we need Jesus in the Christian theology, because we're eternally separated from God. Without Jesus, there is no way to make up that divide. We are enemies of God. So that's the issue. What if you're not interested in becoming, you want to continue to be God's enemy and you actually have a plan? That's what we're talking about. And like I mentioned a minute ago, what if we can find out or can hypothesize or theorize or assume about the Tower of Babel? What if it actually not maybe stands in its original form, but there's evidence of it still being around? And from that, we can glean some new information. Okay. So while the fallen angels themselves were imprisoned, let's back up. The foundation of this hypothesis, as we started last time, it lies in the biblical account of, what we just talked about. Angels coming to the earth as described in Genesis 6 in the book of Enoch. But also the New Testament. In Jude and 2 Peter, we have the same mention. So it's not as if it's some old, antiquated theory that no one subscribes to, or it's rejected by the, Christianity the past 2,000 years. It's not. It's just not talked about. It's kind of pushed off to the side. But it's in the New Testament as well. So according to all those texts, certain angels referred to in the New Testament as those who left their first estate or their proper dwelling or their home. That's in heaven. That's not on the earth. But they left that. They rebelled against God by leaving heaven voluntarily and interacting with humanity. They were not permitted to do that. God didn't send them. So in we can call them angels, and we can. But in the strict sense of the word, to be an angel is to be a messenger. You're sent from God to do something. It really doesn't describe the species or the creature. It actually describes their mission, right? Or what they're doing. So in that case, these fallen angels are really not angels at all. They're whatever they are. They have chosen to rebel, break the rules, and come to the earth directly to do things with human women and to execute some type of plan. And that's where Enoch is really valuable, and I'm talking about the first Enoch, or Ethiopian book of Enoch, which the Ethiopian church still uses today as scripture, by the way. The only one that I know of. But there's some script there. And this version is the Ronald K. Brown interpretation into English, which is, I guess, the R.H. Charles, or some other one is more prevalent. It's the free one on the internet or whatever. This one is not, but I think it's better. It's more modern. So anyway, this is where Enoch is valuable, because it gives us the details of there was a plan. And yes, these fallen ones, there were 200 of them. They came to Mount Hermon, so we're not going to talk about that really, but there's something going on there, and that's where Jesus possibly went to say these are the gates of hell at this location. But anyway, there was a plan, and they conspired to execute that plan in Genesis 6. It wasn't just some random thing. So these angels, first of all, again, created children. So whether that's interbreeding, like old school regular way, or some other kind of way, we don't know. We know women became pregnant and children were born, and they were very, very different than normal children. You can't hide these Nephilim. You can't, get away in a crowd. They were really, really big. They were really different. So just keep that in mind if we're talking about, if you think there's current, if you think this is still going on, and a lot of people do think that there's, again, fallen angels are continuing to do this process with human beings. I don't know how you can say that really, considering what we see the result was the first time. But anyway, so they had this offspring. You can call it a hybrid offspring if you'd like. But we know the angels had something to do with it, at least, and that where you'd get your giant Nephilim. But additionally, it wasn't just that procedure or the product of these offspring, but they taught humanity secret knowledge, including technology, metal working. Now, wait a minute. If you're a UFO person, if you want to get to the bottom of this, and you want to say, well, where are these crazy machines coming from? Where is this crazy technology coming from? Where is these crazy metals coming from? Well, they're not really weird metals. They're on the earth, but they're put, and you know what I'm talking about if you've looked into this. They're constructed in such a way that they're at the molecular level, and they're metamaterials. We've even came up with the name. Right? Metamaterials. Well, how does that? That's weird, because we can find this stuff around, but we don't know how it's made. Well, you just so happen to have the details in your ancient texts, and not random ancient texts, and not texts that don't have anything to do with the Bible or contradict it, but the Holy Scriptures and the Book of Enoch. This is the real deal stuff. and really, really old. And you have in there where a fallen creature teaches humanity, not the Nephilim necessarily, although you could assume that they taught them as well. But they're teaching people high technology, including metalwork. And weaponry, by the way, weaponry. They showed them how to build weapons, swords. Yeah, it says swords and shields, but we're talking high tech. Who didn't know how to build a sword? Or how could you not figure that out? It's stuff that cuts things and is deadly to a human. You can figure that out pretty easy. You don't need an angel to teach you that. You know what I mean? Okay. Weaponry, other forbidden arts. Why is it forbidden? Well, God has a reason for forbidding things. Because it corrupts the earth, corrupts the creation of God. Not only the earth itself is corrupted, but the people, his children, the ones he loves and created in his image, these are the ones who get corrupted, and that is the real issue. And if you have a group of super people now who are getting super advanced knowledge and forbidden knowledge, and they don't care that it's forbidden, they don't care that God doesn't want them to have it. They don't care about any of that. Now we have a situation. So God, in response, I just want to stress this. God has already acted on these angels that came to the earth before Noah's time, okay? This is before the flood of Noah, right? We all know that. But God imprisoned these fallen ones, the ones who made the Nephilim, until the judgment of the great day of the Lord, right? Until that day of judgment, they can't come out. There's no part 2 for them. Jude and 2 Peter say that. So the Nephilim, though, along with the rest of humanity, were destroyed in the flood. The testimony is either they destroyed each other. Again, this is in Enoch. These giants, these Nephilim, either were sent on each other, they killed each other, they cannibalized each other, literally, over who knows what. They destroyed each other, or they were killed by the flood itself. Now, they may have had children that, or passed along some type of knowledge, okay, because people did survive. Right, the Noah and his family, but the spirits of those Nephilim, those giants, remember, they were cursed. You don't get to go to heaven or even do what any other normal person does. You're stuck here. That's what Enoch teaches us, that those spirits of those Nephilim were kept on the earth as what we call demons, what Jesus would call a demon. Those where they came from. That's where they came from. You can't just create a demon. You can't just summon one. There's not millions of them out there. That's actually a spirit of a thing that used to live and was a giant human called the Nephilim. Those are those spirits that can't escape, and they can't go into space, and they can't go anywhere else. They're stuck. All they want to do is inhabit a human body to possess, because they can't find rest. They're just obsessed with it. That's the testimony of the Bible. It might be very strange or different to some people to hear that, but that's it with those Nephilim, okay? But now we have the flood of Noah that's wiped everything out, right? So while the fallen angels were imprisoned and the Nephilim were destroyed, the knowledge they imparted may have survived the flood. Why wouldn't knowledge survive? Maybe Noah's own family was taught. Maybe they didn't believe it or whatever. Or maybe there was some other way that this knowledge survived. Because the flood can't kill knowledge, could it? And that's what they were passing down. They knew bodies would die. They knew even angels could be imprisoned, but knowledge would continue. This hypothesis suggests that the Tower of Babel, often interpreted as an act of human rebellion, which it is, but it could have been an attempt to reconnect with these ones who taught them originally, to reconnect with where those angels came from, or maybe to even continue this program that was begun with the Nephilim. Again, it wouldn't be angels themselves doing it, but maybe humanity got together and said, "Wait, I want to try this again. Let's see how to do this. Let's learn how to do this because we can get it right this time. We can make creatures of our own. We can make hybrids of some kind, or with this awesome knowledge and technology that we've been given. Maybe we can create something and it would be better and it would actually serve our purposes." The tower itself. What about the Tower of Babel? It's an extremely, it's intricate. It's necessary in Genesis 11 to the whole issue. It's not just that these humans were getting together and had conspiring against God and were plotting all this stuff. God isn't real specific there. He says anything they desire to do, they'll be able to do. So it has something to do with this tower. What could that possibly be? The tower itself may have served as a symbolic means or maybe a literal, technological means to communicate with or access these entities, or maybe even aside from communicating, to actually get around the rules. Through a portal or an advanced device. What do I mean by that? Well, in the first chapters of Genesis, as many of us are familiar with, God created the heavens and the earth, and he created the way it works. The rules of the game, as it were. The sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the atmosphere, the water above, the water beneath, how this all happens, how it's all shaped and formed. And so he has rules for those on the earth, Adam and Eve and their children and so forth. I don't know. What if these descendants eventually, who is learning these forbidden knowledge and has no interest in serving God, but want to do their own thing, thank you very much, there's some things they can't escape or they can't get away from or they can't do within the confines of the earth because God planted humans here and this is the ground rules, okay, the rules of the game here. What if they could somehow escape the bounds of the earth in, again, a metaphoric way or a dimensional way or maybe a physical way? I won't show it here, but there is strong, powerful, shocking connections between an existing structure in the land of Ur. You remember that if you're a Bible student, because Abraham was from there. Right after the flood, right after Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, then you have the story of Abraham. Same location. Well, there actually is the ruins of a ziggurat or a pyramid-ish temple, usually it's referred to as a structure called the Ziggurat of Ur. It's still there. It's in the nation of Iraq today, in the deserts there. And there it is. And you can see a very clear shape now. It's been excavated and archaeology teams have been there for a few decades now, I believe, trying to, kind of restore and not destroy it and see what's going on there. Well, many interesting things have happened there, including allegedly, like there is photos. It happened. There was a visit to this ziggurat for some reason by the United States Armed Forces during Desert Storm or Desert Shield or one of these operations after Saddam Hussein was overthrown in Iraq. I can't remember the year. Somebody will correct me on this, but they were there for something and they went inside apparently, and nobody knows anything after that. It's classified, but it's still there. And the shocking part is the moon. There's researchers and folks have done awesome work on this. And Mike Barra, I believe, is the one who actually put this on a screen. That blew me away. There's a side-by-side and the area of the moon called the Daedalus region of the moon. There's what's called the Daedalus ziggurat. And if you put side-by-side, which there is a photo of the ziggurat of Ur in Iraq and the ziggurat on Daedalus on the moon, they look extremely similar. Extremely similar. Just so happens that this ziggurat is on the far side of the moon, not the near side. You know, the far side of the moon, some people call it the dark side, the far side of the moon never faces the Earth. We never see it. We never have seen it throughout human history, as far as I know. Right? But yet this ziggurat is on the opposite end. And again, I just want to throw it out there. It just so happens if you were to make a straight line through the moon, and the other side of the surface of the moon from the ziggurat on the far side, if you came through the opposite end on the near side, there just happens to be looks like a portal there. It's a hole. An anomalous hole. I believe things have been seen emerging from that place. So put two and two together for the purpose of this hypothesis. Say, wait a minute. Is it really possible that you had these human beings, not angels, not Nephilim, human beings who attempted way back when, right after the flood, to get together, literally, to conspire against God to do some great, fantastic, super technological or something that is so urgent and pressing that God had to stop them? They were at such a level of knowledge, of understanding stuff, and I'm going to read from Enoch now to maybe tell us what kind of stuff, to the point where he had to stop them. Otherwise, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. And that's not holding down human innovation and human dreams and whatever. That's silly. Okay, that's an atheist talking. No, this is something this is a threat. This is a threat to the whole order. So whatever God's doing, this is in opposition. And it has something to do with knowledge, technology, warfare, and metals, for example. And by the way, that part of the book of Genesis, from Adam and Eve right through to the Tower of Babel, right, or through Genesis 6 at least, where we had these visitations and these Nephilim and so forth, the lifespan of human beings was much longer. The lifespan of people was very, very long indeed. Hundreds and hundreds of years was an average life, according to the genealogy in Genesis, both of Adam's family through Seth, right? Cain and Abel. Abel was killed by Cain. Seth was their child after that. So through Seth, but also through Cain, there were long lifespans. So it's possible that after God disrupted this Tower of Babel project, those who possessed this forbidden knowledge went underground, maybe literally, but certainly figuratively. Right? God didn't kill them. God didn't destroy them. God didn't. In fact, it doesn't even say he destroyed the tower. He just said he confused their communications. It says their language. Now, if they had high technology, if you said today confused, they couldn't communicate anymore. That's saying a lot more than is being said, I believe, when it says confuse their language. But they went underground at that point if they wanted to continue the project, right? So they had incredible knowledge, incredible technology, incredible plans, to the point where there might be getting to the moon, for crying out loud. Maybe this is why God wanted to stop it, because, wait a minute, I only set these things up for people on the earth. If they get off of the earth, they'd have I don't want to say a legal case, but they could maybe do things that they couldn't do there and accomplish things they could never accomplish and screw up the plan that I have. It's possible. So if they went underground, I'm not saying everyone at the tower continued and wanted to, continue to with this evil plan, but maybe they did. And maybe I'm sure some of them did. So those who possessed this knowledge went underground. Now you would call that what? A hidden civilization. Breakaway civilization. Now that term today in the UFO world, Richard Dolan and others have used it to describe modern humans breaking away, like away from governments and having their own like kind of oligarchy or whatever, full of super rich high technology. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an actual breakaway hidden civilization from thousands and thousands of years ago. What if they started the plan then? We're talking, how many years ago are we talking now? 5,000 years. What if you had a 5,000 year head start on today with knowledge that was way more advanced than anyone else on the earth? And wisdom and technology, not wisdom, technology and weapons, etc. Couldn't you surmise and see the potential for what we're seeing with the UFO phenomenon today is because, or couldn't you see that, wow, if somebody had a 5,000 year head start and they already had high tech and high knowledge of anything and they're trying to escape the planet or whatever, what would they look like now? Or how would their operation and plan look now? What would it look like if you encountered them? To me, this makes eminently more sense, even if it might be totally crazy and you never heard such a thing, and it might be wrong, but this makes more sense to me than imagining that it's a extraterrestrial race that just so happens to look like us and just so happens to stay in the shadows all the time and never want to be videoed or whatever. And why are they doing what they're doing? And is it about us? Is it about the planet? Is it about this or that? Well, that's a much farther bridge to cross, connection to make than this hypothesis is. So they went underground. The hidden civilization, if they were equipped with advanced technology and potentially long lifespans, they may have continued to develop in secret. Where, you would say, well, maybe they have the technology to stay literally hidden. Maybe they found a way to live underground. literally underground, under the surface of the earth. What if they found a way to live in the ocean? Or even have some kind of base of operation on the moon? It sounds wacky. Or does it? Let's look at the book of Enoch as we close out this second section called Nephilim to Babel of the Hypothesis. In chapter 6 of the book of Enoch, you have basically and they're very short. Let me just read some of it. You basically have a expansion or repetition of Genesis chapter 6. I encourage you to read Genesis chapter 6. Study it. And it came to pass when the children of men, again, this is from the translation by Brown of Book of Enoch. And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied in those days and were born to them beautiful and comely daughters, the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men and get us children. So they had a desire from heaven. There's no ambiguity here. I know some people will say Genesis 6 is about other people or some kind of race, from Seth or the sons of God don't mean angels. There's no reason to think that it refers to other humans. It's silly, actually. There's no ambiguity whatsoever in Enoch. And by the way, you say Enoch is some say it's a forgery or it's a Christian document. That is a lie. It is a total fabrication. We know for a fact it was discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran, which means it is before the time of Jesus by at least several hundred years. And so we're talking about Old Testament times now. And if this is what it says it is, which is authored by Enoch, the seventh of Adam. By the way, who says Enoch, the seventh of Adam, wrote something? The New Testament says that Enoch, the seventh of Adam, the original, wrote something. And in chapter 1 of this book, that's where Jude is quoting from. Okay. Anyway, just to give a little weight to the fact that, well, it's not in the Bible, I don't have to believe it. Reconsider. This book, not every book, in fact, not even other Enochs, okay, this one. And the angels, the children of the heavens, saw and lusted after them. Come, let us choose wives from among the children of men and get us children. And Semjaja, these are names of these angels, who was their leader, said to them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty for this sin. So he's saying, y'all saying you want to do it now, but you're all going to blame me. I'm the only one who's going to do it, and I'm going to get punished. They all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath and bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they all swear together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in total 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves mutual imprecations upon it. So it's literally saying there is a conspiracy, a plan by 200 fallen angels. They decided together that they were going to leave heaven together and go make children with human women and bear the responsibility for it together. If there was punishment, they were going to take it together, and they did. And it goes on and names these the leaders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, 16. There's about 20 named. I'll spare you the names. Okay, these are the chiefs of 10. So there were 20 leaders, each over 10. That's 200. And one of them is called Azazel. Azazel is actually in the book of Leviticus, usually translated as scapegoat. It's a very interesting passage in Leviticus about sacrificing and the goat that goes to Azazel. Anyway, here he is in the book of Enoch. Azazel taught men, this is chapter 8 of Enoch, Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, and shields, breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them. He just told you this Azazel character, this fallen angel, this commander of the fallen angels before Noah's flood, teaching men, taught men, not taught the Nephilim, not the children that they bore to the women, taught other humans, not their kids, how to make weapons and work with metals. Ornaments, the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids and all kinds of costly stones and coloring tinctures. Now, these are very funny words. And like, oh, it taught women to put on makeup? Okay, but what's really going on here? And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Who's they? The people, the human beings, the regular humans. They believed, they learned, they were taught this, they learned it, believed it, and practiced it. Semjaza taught enchantments, sorcery, spells, special things to get around the laws of nature, as it were. Taught enchantments, root cuttings. Others taught astrology, the constellations, the knowledge of clouds, signs of the earth, signs of the sun, and the course of the moon. Not the signs of the moon, the course of the moon, how it travels. Maybe that there's a dark side or a far side that you never see. Take advantage of that. As the men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. Skipping over a little into chapter 9, this is where it starts to say God's response, where he actually sends archangels, again, the ones who were actually sent by God, so they're angels. The chief, the generals, basically, of God's army. They are named Michael. We know Michael from the Old Testament and New Testament. Gabriel, we know Gabriel from the Old and the New Testament. But also two that we don't hear about, Uriel and Raphael. And these are consistently Hebrew names, so it doesn't surprise me that this could be a legitimate list. He sent them after to do something about these guys. Verse 6, you see what Azazel has done, who has taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. I just want to leave you with that. That's chapter 9, verse 6 of Enoch. And then it goes on to say what happened to Azazel and the rest of these guys, what was done and all that. But you see what Azazel has done. Taught all unrighteousness. Taught, again, not to the Nephilim, okay, taught to human beings, unrighteousness on earth, and revealed eternal secrets. He revealed secrets to human beings which were preserved in heaven. That means they were meant to stay there. That's why it's forbidden. Eternal secrets. Preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. That is the crux. That regular humans, regular men, striving to learn, we want this knowledge so bad. We are trying so hard to achieve this secret forbidden knowledge. Azazel, for example, gave it to them. And so what did they do with it? They made the Tower of Babel, for example. That's what I'm suggesting. That's what it seems is the implication. So whether it be, we didn't talk about the Garden of Eden, but you can, all the way back to the serpent, Satan, in the Garden of Eden, or the fallen angels in Genesis 6, or the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, all resulted in human beings, men, not supernatural things, not angels, not demons, men acquiring hidden knowledge that is used to oppose God. That is the connection from Nephilim to Babel in the hypothesis. All right, everyone. Welcome back to The Hypothesis. We are now approaching part 3. We have arrived at part 3 of The Hypothesis, as we've already covered in the first 2 parts. We are going over as far as I know, a new theory. We call it the hypothesis because it's really untestable at this point. But it's a comprehensive idea based on available evidence and data about what exactly is behind this phenomenon that we call UFOs. And to this point, we've talked about the aspects of what it is and is not, the prevailing opinions that don't sit well, the fact that truth at the end of the day is what matters the most, and not to make the mistake of singling out one of the aspects of this phenomenon without embracing the other as also true, which is physical objects and what appear to be almost supernatural level of technology and what we call woo, right? Things that we cannot even understand, that behave more like poltergeists or unseen things. Well, to remember that the unseen does not in any way mean unphysical or unnatural. Doesn't have to be supernatural or spiritual just because you can't see it. So that's all part of this. Okay, so today we're going to get into some of the things themselves, the UFOs, the orbs, which we are I am separating out as a possibly a distinct situation, and the fact that there have been major cover-ups. That it's really not in dispute at this point. Okay, here's what we're going to cover today. UFOs being some type of object for whatever purpose, whether they be to transport passengers or some type of spying or observing or transportation or who knows what. The hypothesis that you are hearing says that they are not extraterrestrial. They are not angels or demons. They are something else. The transmedium nature of these objects that has been satisfactorily observed long-term, both by human beings and their eyeballs and multiple instruments recorded multiple ways. You can see them on TV shows, frankly, like Skinwalker Ranch, actually displaying this ability to not only fly through the sky like a theoretical spaceship would, but actually go into the water of the oceans and other bodies of water, but the oceans and into solid earth, solid rock, without, as if they're not even there, and yet disappearing from view when they go into the water or into the solid earth. So that belies the first layer, if you will, of deception. The fact is that there's something that's not being revealed by the whatever is behind these objects, call them vehicles or what have you. But the fact that they are traversing through different mediums should tell us something. The beings that are being encountered, without dismissing it, this hypothesis embraces what many folks have seen in personal encounters and on a national governmental scale, where things have been recovered or beings have been, whether dead or alive, or with communication or not, whatever that state of life is. We're assuming, the hypothesis is assuming that's all true, that it's not only possible, but we're assuming that there are creatures, call them NHI or what have you. But what if they're not, don't look like humans? They kind of sort of look like humans, but not all the way. That nature reveals that perhaps they are not what they seem. And from the beginning of this, many who are encountering these beings, we reference Colonel Corso and the Day After Roswell book several times, because he was basically there from the beginning, and the encounters with these beings that they were recovering right from the get-go, they were hypothesizing that they are not actually living beings, that there's some type of creation themselves. Created by who? I'm not talking about God as a transcendent creator. We're talking about as if a company today produces let's say an android, a robotic sentient or semi-sentient form of a product, a home robot type of thing, right? Like, that you wouldn't consider that a form of life, would you? Well, if you have a 5,000 year head start on everyone else, then maybe you can make some darn convincing stuff. So that in the hypothesis would state that they are not actually other creatures from a different part of the universe or the different dimension or whatever, but they're actually creations, scientific creations of hidden human beings. They are not only hiding their intentions, if this is the case, they're putting a barrier of, even if you get to see something, it's not us, it's something else. We're showing you something to throw you off the scent. These creations of ours is actually what you're going to see. So that's not their only deception. It's actually their location is part of it as well. In other words, if they're trying to obfuscate, if they're trying to hide, if they're trying to pull one over on the rest of humanity, then they'd have to physically hide. It is revealing, again, in the opinion of the hypothesis, that these vehicles, the UFOs and such, would be traveling to the moon, underwater, under the oceans, where no human can live without some real technical help, right? Or even underground. The fact that we have, and as we just said, we see these vehicles or what have you go underground, go underwater, go into space, doesn't mean they're from outer space. Maybe it just means that's where they're traversing. Maybe they have some type of base or home in one of these, what you would call non-traditional human abodes. We'll get to in a minute. The orb phenomenon is possibly, it might be the same thing or it might be different, because it may be a separate phenomenon, because many times they behave in concert and usually quite differently than a typical UFO encounter. They're very much in tandem, and it seems like they're on a mission, like they're doing something. And usually in a very tight triangle, to be honest with you. And there are people who have done some real work in this, and in their opinion, it's a tantamount to a security system, the orb phenomenon, that it's maybe not related to the UFO issue, or maybe it's another type of technology, or maybe it's an opposing technology. And then there's the deception by the government, or governments, plural. There can be no doubt, in the words of Carl Nell, there is zero doubt that there is a 100% cover-up and deception, because the evidence is overwhelming. It's overwhelming that it's true in itself that yes, there are facts, there are events of history, there are current events, there are things about this phenomenon that the government, and we always think of the United States, the richest, the most advanced technologically, the ones that are through our system of government, where we're supposed to have checks and balances. If there's a way to get around that, you have a real problem dislodging that, what you would call a security state. And that's the reality that we appear to be in. So there's absolutely a cover-up. It has occurred, and it is continuing. The question not is it happening, but why? It's not like, are there UFOs and orbs? Why are there? What's behind it? What's the reasoning? The reason for the cover-up, is it usually why there are cover-ups, which is to cover up illegal behavior? There's crimes happening, or there are embarrassments that they don't want to admit, even 8 decades on, or 10. We're talking about World War II and the Foo Fighters. That's almost 100 years ago. And so they're either covering up crimes, or whether it's legitimate or not, are they doing it to prevent or avoid societal collapse? There is a line of thinking, again, whether it's valid or not, that many folks have said, and those, even some who have worked in this national security state, as it were, have said, is that if the truth comes out about UFOs and what we know, which apparently is very limited, but if it comes out, society itself will break down. And if that's true, if that's for sure going to happen, and if you were in the position to reveal that truth, and you knew that if you revealed it, or if you believed that if you revealed it, or if we generally revealed it, society itself would collapse, would you do it? Right? So this is maybe something more people would maybe not excuse or could understand. This is much more ethical than covering up crimes. But if you're saying that society is going to collapse and nothing good probably is going to come of that, a lot of pain and suffering, and basically you're weighing two options. One is keep the cover-up going and keep society around, or unleash the truth and society goes away, or devolves into base instinct and things we don't want. No, I don't think anyone wants that. So that's another potential reason why there is a multi-decade cover-up from governments about this. And yes, it's, again, the evidence points to maybe the United States is the primary driver, but others are completely playing ball and are also covering up to their populations. although there is some evidence that we're not united in, it's not altruistic. We're not doing it for each other's good. We're only doing it until we can figure it out. And it's a very weaponistic, kind of evil scientist mindset, which is break the technology. We recovered this technology, something crashed or we brought it down or whatever. They're not they're not asking the big questions. They're like, how do we make this into a weapon? And if so, then you probably have enemy nations who are figuring the same thing, who are trying to do the same thing. And whoever figures it out first now can reveal it and have an insurmountable advantage to be the dominant nation in the world, which to some people is still appealing. So it could be that. Or frankly, maybe the most frightening or disconcerting and discombobulating of all would be, is it because the governments of the world are covering up the UFO topic because they agreed to with the phenomenon itself, with the others, as it were? Whether they think they're little grays or mantids or lizards or tall, Nordics or whatever, whatever they think that is behind it, or the power is behind it, or the structure, whatever, they were agreeing not to do it on purpose, maybe under threat. Maybe the phenomenon is saying, do not reveal what you know, otherwise. It's possible. Okay, so again, just to be perfectly clear, this hypothesis is positing that UFOs are not extraterrestrial craft. There's no evidence that UFOs are coming from outside the solar system, for example. Some folks may be offended by this thought even. We're not even willing to entertain the idea that they're not spaceships. But again, from the beginning, some of the original folks to run into this stuff have posited different ideas, like maybe these are time machines because of the way they're, how they behave. The fact that it doesn't look like they can go anywhere, but yet they're moving around and looks like extreme speeds, but maybe it's not extreme speeds. Maybe they're just poking little holes, through this process, like mini wormholes, and it looks like they're just traveling very fast. Maybe it's all very different than an interstellar journey. So again, this hypothesis, and it could be wrong, but this hypothesis is saying UFOs are not extraterrestrial crafts, but advanced vehicles created by this hidden civilization of human beings. These crafts, which can travel through the air, into water, and in space, and into solid rock, into the earth itself, may be part of a broader plan to deceive humanity, and not in the traditional Christian understanding of deceiving humanity, because we automatically, as Christians, a lot of us just assign that to the devil and fallen angels and demons, and then we stop thinking about it. What if that's incorrect? The beings behind these crafts, whether they be straight humans, whether we have hybrid going on, some hybrid situation with, the abductee phenomenon, maybe that plays into this, or they're just creating living androids, so to speak, flesh robots, and that's what you're encountering, the Greys, reptilians, et cetera. No matter what we're seeing, no matter what we're encountering, they're not aliens. They are not extraterrestrial from another world. They would be products of this secret society. Their goal may be, and the end game is the final piece of this hypothesis that we'll get to next, but the goal may be to be worshipped as gods, like in the ancient Greek gods type of way. Or we talked about in the second part about the original influx of influence into forbidden knowledge and to rebel against God's plan and order, to escape from it, basically, to go around it. Back in Genesis 6, those Nephilim, those original sons of the result of angel and human reproduction, became gods, basically, the men of renown, it says in the Bible. So that could be what we're dealing with. That mentality, to be worshipped as that, as superior beings, whether you call them aliens or gods or whatever. Maybe they want to be seen in a more gentle way, like ascended masters. That's a new age term, but that's a type of thing that they could do. They're obviously more mentally and every other way superior to us lowly humans here who don't know all this stuff. So they're ascended. They're higher. They could teach us things, and we're all about evolution, right? Now that we hear that kind of stuff a lot from folks who have encountered them. And again, that doesn't denote origin whatsoever, but that could for sure be a giveaway of a deception. Or maybe they're trying to be all the way positive and say, we're your protectors. We're actually here to protect humanity from disaster. And this is something you also hear. We're going to save you from nuclear war or from genocide, or they're doing a terrible job. And they've completely failed to this point, if that's their goal. Something along those lines, or ecological disaster of some kind. The planet is really important. Well, maybe they're after, maybe they don't want to protect us at all. Maybe they're after, they want to protect the planet, and for whatever reason. And that also is something that comes up in researching this topic, if you look into it for any time at all. Or, okay, so they want to be elevated and seen as superior to us, no matter what their actual origin is. They want to be superior to you. They want to be acknowledged as superior. And maybe, they have a very selfish ambition, other than the pride of being elevated and worshipped, is that maybe they're trying to find a way to live forever without the benefit of God's intervention, of what we call resurrection. That you live, your body lives, eventually it dies, because that's all humans have to die. Maybe they don't think so. Maybe they think they can get around this. Well, is it? Now, again, that is something that you could bring all the way back to the Garden of Eden. That where God said, don't do this, you're going to die. And the serpent, the rebel that we call the devil, and Satan says, no. You're just going to know more stuff. Well, they're both true. Now everyone dies. And so maybe they're just, and again, the lifespans at that point, like we talked about in part 2, the lifespans back then were almost a millennium long. Hundreds of years was your first human beings. They lived hundreds of years each. Now, if you get to 100, you're extremely old. So maybe they've tried to get around that, again, by living longer and longer lives. Maybe they don't look so great after a while. Maybe they still die. Maybe they're just trying to get around that whole problem, to live forever without God, without the resurrection. It's an idea. But either way, they are hiding their true origins. They're perpetuating a deception, not because they're demons, but because they're actually just like us. And we can't find that out. That would be destructive for them. That would be a problem. Okay. Now, again, to the orbs. In addition to your typical UFOs, this hypothesis considers the phenomenon of orbs or metallic spheres, or someone called plasmoid systems. Okay. In other words, it looks like a silvery metal. Most times it's a ball, a sphere. You would call an orb shape. Sometimes they're lit up, like that's what I would call an orb, if it has you could see it in the dark, but sometimes they're not. I saw one last June that was in the broad daylight. It had no light of its own that I could see. It was just a silver ball just sitting there, hanging out. Okay. And then it was gone. It didn't fly anywhere. It just, that I saw, it just was gone. Maybe it wasn't gone. Maybe it just hid itself. But the point is, sometimes they change their shape. Sometimes they're not a ball. Sometimes you see them actually, there's videos that you might discount or whatever, but they're in shapes that kind of sort of looks like a plane or a bird, and then it changes, and then it morphs, and then it becomes something totally unrecognizable, like amorphous, like there is no form. It's just kind of changing and floating and drifting around. That may all be the same thing. And it could be some type of, maybe it's a life form, but maybe it's a system. Maybe it's a technological system potentially distinct from these crafts that are associated with this hidden civilization. So humans, again, the hypothesis would say hidden human beings have created UFOs for their own purposes, whether it be travel, transportation, or whatever, or weapon systems, ways to keep us in the dark or keep us threatened, who knows, whatever. They created UFOs. But these plasmoids may not be them. Maybe. It's kind of awkward to say the hypothesis doesn't have an answer on this particular thing if it's a hypothesis, but I just wanted to throw it out there that it may be the exact same thing. Yes, this secret society, these secret humans made the plasmoid, the orbs, the spheres as well. That's just part of what they've got. But it's possible they're different because, again, like we said before, they behave in a very different way at times, like a defense mechanism. Again, there are testimonies, there are videos, there are things you can see where sometimes there's what you would call a UFO flying around, and then these spheres show up and kind of surround said UFO, maybe not because they want to join the party or fly in some mission together. They, again, think of what we will, but there are times where they surround this UFO in they're triangulating literally, right? That's a phrase where like you're getting a target, you're fixing on a target, you're triangulating their exact position in the sky or on the earth, whatever it is, you're triangulating their position. So you know exactly, you're aiming at them. And so a lot of times they're literally triangulating around, and this craft UFO all of a sudden is either takes off or blows up. So now if that's the case, now that tells me there's some type of opposition happening. There's some type of something different about those things. Maybe it's like a police force. Maybe the hidden civilization has their own police. Those are the cops, basically. Like something gets out of line, you send those guys to take care of it. Maybe the UFO is going rogue. Maybe there's a faction of the hidden humans that want to do something that's not part of the plan, or they want to go off script, and you got to take care of that problem. Maybe that's what they are. So in that case, yes, they're the same phenomenon or related, but they have a different purpose. That's possible. And we have, again, not only recent examples, like I'm talking about videos, but way back when, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, over Europe, there are famous not works of art, but obviously there are no cameras then, but representations of what people saw over parts of Germany and the UK, and then things. We're talking 400 or 500 years ago. 1400, 600 years ago, where you have pictures of what people apparently saw or said they saw, which were basically a bunch of orbs in the sky and a bunch of UFO looking things in the sky, and they were not being nice to each other. There are actually battles in one scene. So that's something to consider. And to that, we're like, well, maybe they're not a police force. Maybe they're not actually owned and operated by these guys who are behind the regular UFOs. Maybe this is God. Maybe this is possibly a godly device. Maybe this is angels, as it were. It's possible. In the fact that they could be different and a defense mechanism. Maybe, again, it's very technological. Maybe it's to protect the Earth from physical threats like asteroids. Or if this secret, right, the Earth actually getting pummeled by something, maybe these guys are there to take care of it, to make sure the Earth is not hurt. Or they have to check on these, again, this secret society that he has to keep an eye on them, and they got to take care of business when they get out of line or what have you. So, it's just another aspect we can think about, that perhaps this is something different. Again, and if a lot of folks have just a very different experience when they see these things, I did not. For my part, I didn't have any kind of spiritual experience at all. But some people do, and sometimes it's very positive, and the names, and some is very negative, and orbs follow them around, and it's not just triangles in the sky of orbs. You got them in your house. That doesn't lean or lend itself to something benign. Or something from God that he's just trying to protect the Earth, or right? Seems like something else is going on. So anyway, we've got to put that all into the hopper. All right, and then again, I don't even want to spend much time on the fact that there's a cover-up. The deception is, frankly, the hypothesis itself exists because of the indisputable nature of UFOs, that they are real and they are interacting with the most technological devices that humans have, and are being recorded by such things like fighter jets. Like the past couple of years, since 2017 now, these videos have come out and stories have been written and people have been interviewed and are coming out saying, yeah, I was part of this, or we looked into this, or I was in the air and I saw this, or I interacted with these, and there's a Tic Tac, then there's a gimbal, and the Go Fast. And like all of a sudden, at first there was denial by the government. Oh yeah, we can't, no comment on those videos, but it turns out actually, yes, they are real. Not only are they real videos from the Department of Defense, from the F-18, the fighter jets or what have you, the systems in like the naval ships, but they actually are unidentified. We don't know what it was, so it's a UAP in the common parlance. Those are actual UAPs that you're seeing in those famous videos. Your government has admitted that because they're against the wall. They had no choice. We knew it was, right? Like, okay, fine. That is. And that reveals something else. Well, in a second, I'll just say the reason why this hypothesis even exists is because of that reality, that emerging reality, that not only are there are many very, very unimpeachable character people, pilots and military folks who have the utmost respect in our society. They do. To a fault. But, men and women are coming out and saying, yeah, this is real. I was there. I saw it. I detected it. I recorded it. Here it is. And to the point where folks like David Grush, who are very, very high up in the intelligence community, have come out and said, yeah, it's all real. And we've recovered craft and we've recovered bodies. Now, I'm like, you know what? We've got to think about this real seriously. And if it's just the Hollywood explanation of aliens from another world, so be it. But maybe it's not. And maybe the Christians have got it wrong too. Maybe there's something else. That's the genesis, if you will, of the hypothesis. The reason, after David Grush and, for example, come out and Fravor and Graves, etc., said, we gotta put together some kind of hypothesis. So there it is. That's the reason why this even exists, is because there is a ongoing, long-standing, provable, no doubt about it, cover-up by your governments. And especially being an American citizen and being actively involved with and involved in the process of elections and following the military history and having veterans in my family and the whole thing, I take it very, very personal that there is such a deception going on by my government, and that we're willingly doing it and probably committing crimes to continue the cover-up. Maybe the cover-up wasn't because of a crime, but crimes have been committed in the name of keeping the secret, and that is very wrong. And as an American, very upsetting. So, do your homework. Go to history class. Read the materials. The Richard Dolan's probably where I would send people. He has literally volumes. Now he has 4 volumes of history, not written as some wide-eyed super believer and this everything is obviously true. No, it's a historian, as a trained historian. He is documenting things that are, in his view, there's backup for, there's evidence of, not the whole story, why and where, I know what's going on type of thing, but this really happened. And these guys actually covered it up. Here's the proof. Here's the paperwork. Here's the testimony. He has 4 volumes now, 2 on the national security state that have been out for several years and 2 that are just coming out. I know it's a 2-parter. The first one is called the USOs, underwater UFOs. There's a whole history of them, which to me and to many folks make you think again, wait, how there are aliens from another planet who are in spaceships, but why are they in the ocean? What's that about? And why don't they make a splash, by the way, when they go into the ocean? Right, or come out, or go into a mountain, etc. There's just no doubt. There's no doubt that something is being covered up by your government. So, and that's not a conspiracy theory. There's proof of it. Mountains, reams of paper. Incontrovertible. So there's no reason to cover something up if there's nothing happening. There's no there. You would never spend $1 on something that there's no there. You wouldn't spend a minute of your time as a military if there's no there. But the behavior and the dollars and the black operations and the USAPs and the WUSAPs, all that, and the history going back decade after decade after decade, that all is very conclusive that yes, it's a real cover-up. So whatever is behind this UFO phenomenon, whether this hypothesis is true or not, is correct or not, what is not in dispute is the government, usually of the United States, but all those who are agreeing to do it with them are covering it up. So it's so important to them that this must be done. And that is part 3 for our hypothesis. All right, friends, this is the conclusion of what we've been doing the past 4 sessions here called the hypothesis, the end game. What is the end game of all of this? The ultimate goal, as the hypothesis has put forward, if it's correct, there is a hidden breakaway civilization of human beings for the past 5,000 years, give or take, that have, from the very beginning of that period, had extreme knowledge. You would call secret knowledge, forbidden knowledge, as it were, and high technology. It's possible, and it's put forward by this hypothesis, that there is at least a connection between that extreme knowledge and extreme technology with the Tower of Babel in Iraq, again, thousands of years ago, and the connection with that location, potentially to the moon itself. And you could maybe somewhat understand the motivations and goals if all that is accurate. So what is the end game? Again, as a Christian, as a pastor, I believe the Bible is true. I don't believe there's any reason to suspend disbelief or to hyperly criticize the words of the scriptures. And whatever is true about the UFO topic must come into line with what the Bible says. Doesn't mean we should assume anything, but if this hypothesis is true, it doesn't change anything about the Bible itself. It would just add another wrinkle that maybe we have never noticed before in this final drama. Okay, so what is the ultimate goal of this breakaway or hidden civilization for the past 5,000 years? It may be to continue what the original invaders, if you will, Genesis 6 and Enoch, when angels left heaven and came to the earth and created hybrid life forms. However you want to look at that, however you want to understand how they were born, there was unimpeachable statements in the Bible throughout. This is New Testament as well as Old Testament. In Jude and Peter, you have the same information, which is that, yes, angels left heaven. They sinned greatly. They created these things called Nephilim, which are a combination of themselves and human beings. And the resultant offspring were giant, intimidating, violent, perhaps giant more than physically. Perhaps they were intellectually as well. But the point is, through those details, we see that from the beginning, there was a intentional program. The intent from that point was to teach human beings, those who would listen to these fallen angels, about hidden knowledge. And that would continue on from the stories we hear from the Garden of Eden and again on through the Tower of Babel. So the part of the goal may be to take what they were told, they saw way back when, in the time before the flood of Noah, which is creating other beings that God didn't make. It's kind of easy to assume, well, God made everything. Well, sometimes that's why we call it technology. We've actually, humans can create other things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at a certain point, you're making something that's alive or very close to being alive or to meet the definition of a life form, then now it's questionably, the ethics are very questionable. So maybe they're just continuing that program. A lot of folks in the abduction community are very opinionated about this. They are sure that this is what this is about. Creating other life, continuing what has happened in the past, mixing human beings with some other kind of either DNA or technology to produce something new, another form of life. So that could be what we are doing. It's possible within that, as a subtext to that, it's possible that folks are being, those who are targeted or chosen for this program, could possibly still have some type of latent trace of DNA in themselves. Maybe they're being chosen or targeted because of their family line, their lineage back to 5,000 years ago or more. It's possible somewhere in their families there was this manipulation in the past, and perhaps, how genes and DNA and things work. It's coded in there where there may be information from thousands of years ago that is still present today, that perhaps this is why this program is occurring, abductions and so forth. It could be. Now, there's not just humans are targeted for abduction or experimentations, right? There's lots and lots of testimony and evidence of cattle and things of that nature, for whatever reason, being used by this phenomenon. But humans obviously are the main issue, and if it's not consensual, it doesn't matter what this phenomenon is. It doesn't matter who's behind it. It doesn't matter what's going on. Really, it's wrong. I think we could agree to that. If the person does not consent to being taken somewhere, they're being kidnapped, that's not okay. And it's certainly not okay in terms of, any kind of rape or sexual or anything physical, anything mental, anything at all, to manipulate, to do something against your will. That is 100% wrong. And we should oppose that regardless of what hypothesis or what theory turns out to be true. I think we all can agree. I hope we could all agree to that. Again, what is the end goal? Maybe they're trying, and again, many folks believe this, that they're attempting to create some type of new race of humans, but better. But I would just add this, which is the case, if, again, assuming this hypothesis is true for the moment, they, just like with the Tower of Babel, they can try whatever they like, but they are restrained by God at the end. Their plans are within God's constraint. So it seems to me part of their whole issue, part of this whole breakaway civilization, the reason for doing that is to get around God's restraints. In fact, the word unrestrained is used in this context in Babel. So I think that's probably part of why they are doing all this, is to get around his sovereignty. But God will not be thwarted in that way. At the end of the day, his guidance, his lordship, his godship over times and seasons is absolute. No matter what the enemy or any human being, no matter how old they are or where they came from or what they're trying to experiment on, we humans and every angel and every other thing in this universe is under his sovereignty. So when his times are up, when his seasons have ended or something needs to begin, that's when it will occur, not because of some type of experimentation or abduction or anything else, a plan of man or angel or anything else. That's what a Christian believes. And that makes sense. That at the end of the day, God's sovereignty has to rule over even this crazy scenario, right? Even this really wild hypothesis. So while they may prepare for certain events, they cannot initiate them without permission from God himself. Hopefully we're being clear about that. No matter what plans, again, it doesn't matter if it's a human being, a human being who's escaped the constraints of time or this dimension or whatever, it has broken away or lives somewhere underground in the ocean, on the moon, whatever. That doesn't matter at the end of the day. They can have all the plans they like. And they can plan for certain things to start at a certain date. But if God says no, it's no. It's never going to happen until the Lord gives the go ahead. And it obviously, if this is happening, it's part of God's plan. He's allowing it to some degree, and he's going to use it in the end times before the return of Jesus and all around that period. And so there may be something deeper going on than just creating hybrids for some unknown purpose just because they feel like experimenting. If this is all true and they're at the end of the day, they're just human beings, they're cursed to die. They're trying to get around perhaps that part, death. And maybe if they can't actually get to that point of overcoming death, to have some type of control or influence or impact on after you die. Because we know very well from the Bible and thousands of years of human history that when you die, your body dies. The Bible says that your soul, spirit, if you like, continues to live. Now, it goes to different places depending on certain things in your life and what you have permission to enter this place, like Sheol, the place of the dead, or are you in heaven? Are you in Abraham's bosom, as it were, as Jesus would tell? The point is, you're still continuing. Even the Nephilim, they died, but their spirits continued as the demons, right? And all those demons are about now is possessing and getting inside a live human being. So that whole afterlife is soul issue perhaps is very, very important to this breakaway civilization. And it would have a lot of people assume that must mean it's another race or, some form of alien life that's not human. But I say, why? Why would that matter at all? And in fact, it would matter most to a human being to learn how that works and to manipulate if you can, or control or influence, etc. So that's possibly something, the deeper issue. It's not just about creating a hybrid. It's maybe they're trying to figure out how to avoid the lake of fire. Or even how to get, again, I would just refer you to in the Gospel of Luke, in the book of Luke in the Bible, Jesus gives a story that you may have heard as a parable, but he doesn't phrase it as a parable. It's called Lazarus and the rich man. There's not the Lazarus that rose from the dead, but a poor man named Lazarus and a rich guy who he was begging outside his door his whole life, and then they both died. And the poor guy who was suffering his whole life was in heaven, and the rich man who had no suffering in his life now was in great suffering in this place called Sheol. And there was no way, even though he asked, he said there was no way to cross over. Abraham told him, Abraham was long dead as well, but he was in heaven, as it were, on this other side of this barrier. Everyone's dead, right? Everyone's dead, but there are souls or spirits that are remaining, but in different places. Maybe it's pure speculation, but perhaps part of this program hybridization, abductions, etc., is for they are freaking out and they want to get out, or they want to get their people away from that place of suffering and into the, someplace it's different. It's possible. It's possible. Now, this hypothesis also connects, if, as I said a minute ago, if this is true, then, and the Bible is true, then there is an end time scenario when, before Jesus returns, of a lot of weird stuff and a lot of extreme stuff and a lot of suffering and really great things, like all kinds of extreme things are happening before the return of Christ. And of course, that event itself is the most world-changing event of all. In the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 10, there is a character, there's a person named the Little Horn. That's the euphemism. It's a leader, a person who is a king, basically, only at the end times, not in history. There's no historical precedent for this. I don't care what type of end times view you have as a Christian or an atheist or whatever. Atheist. This little horn is an end time only person. And one of the really remarkable, seems totally out of place. It always has seemed out of place, even to me. And I've read, and I love the book of Daniel since literally I was a little child. And since I was 15, I went on this quest to understand the Revelation and Daniel and all the crazy parts of the Bible that I loved so much. I know it's true. I don't know what it means, but I know it's true. So what's it all about? Anyway, this one verse in chapter 8 of Daniel, verse 10, it says the little horn actually has this ability to bring down the host of heaven. And it says trample on them. Go look at it yourself. I encourage you to do several different versions of the Bible. They're slightly different wordings, especially when it comes to the Old Testament prophets, but go check it out. Basically, the short version is the host of heaven means the armies of heaven, means the angels of God, or angels that are up there. And this little horn has the ability to take them out, and not in a nice way, in an aggressive, warlike way. And it says trample on them, which means they're dead. Or if it doesn't mean they're dead, it means something very close to that. He has victory over an angel. But I'd bet $1 that it means they're dead. So that's a very, very interesting tidbit. How is this possible? And why is it even mentioned? Why does God bring this up? It stands out like a sore thumb, basically. Like a lot of, Daniel 8 and 7, it talks about this little horn guy a good amount, but all of a sudden it throws in that. I thought we're talking about being a king and ruling over evil, armies and attacking Israel. That's all true, but then also that. So there's something that we need to still process about this whole thing. And I said there's a possible tie-in, if that's the case, it is in there in Daniel 8, to Revelation chapter 12, chapter 13, even chapter 9. And again, this is not going to be a Bible study here in this hypothesis, but I encourage you to go look into this, because particularly in that Daniel verse with this little horn, who is often associated, or it is correctly associated with the Antichrist, okay, or the false prophet, these two end time characters. He definitely is in there. So if he's the Antichrist, he's said to attack the host of heaven and bring them down. This could suggest some type of final confrontation between God and his angels and these deceptive plans of this hidden civilization. If the Antichrist is a man, he's just a person. Is it possible that this false prophet and or antichrist, or maybe it's the same person. But there's really no doubt that it is a person. And what if this person is one of these secret, hidden humans from at least where they started their plans 5,000 years ago? Could this be their ultimate, whether they know it or not, they'd be achieving God's prophecies, even though maybe they didn't even want to. Maybe they had no idea that was even happening. And there's precedent for that. Forces of evil and Satan and all that being confounded, like they're confused. They don't know how they just lost this, because not only did they fail, but they fulfilled the scripture while they did it. The stuff that's already written. How did this happen? Like, how could we be so dumb? Basically. Well, so that could be happening again. I don't believe that evil angels and Satan and evil people have any. I don't think they believe that they are defeated. I know that they know judgment is coming. They know God is going to, come down on them. But until that happens, it seems like they're trying to get away, or they're trying to figure something else out, a loophole to not get that judgment at the end. The Enoch, if you read Enoch, the angels who sinned came back to Enoch and said, "Hey, go back to God for us to get us out of here." So like they're not resigned to their fate. They're always trying to make a move. That's my account of that. So we're gonna take a look yourself. But Revelation chapter 12, and the book is called "Flee to the Mountains," has a whole bit about this that I wrote a couple years ago. But there's an aspect to it that Christians are just not thinking about. We're just not prepared in any way to face Satan and angels. Now, again, I am not. This hypothesis is not. In fact, it's anti-angel in that I do not believe that angels are behind UFOs. This is not what the hypothesis says. What I am saying is there is part of the Bible that says before Jesus returns, there will be angels on the earth. Bad ones. Satan himself and his angels will be here. So what is that going to look like? How is that going to occur? Well, there's a war in heaven, Revelation chapter 12. There's two armies of angels fighting each other. Well, I was like, wait a minute. Didn't we just have a whole army of angels and this little horn has some type of power, permission, ability that apparently no one else has ever had to bring down angels and kill them or to have victory over them? Now, that's not, again, if you read your Bible, that is not a thing. Okay, humans have no chance against an angel, much less an army of angels. There's an account in the Old Testament about one angel taking care of 100,000 plus Assyrian soldiers and killing them all. So that's not an issue normally. There's no fair fight. But anyway, this is just something to process and think about. Revelation chapter 13, after you get this description of this war in heaven and these angels fighting and then coming to the earth, then you have Revelation 13, where now, because of that, you have this final period where this Antichrist and this false prophet are mentioned, and these whole final events now play out. So we're waiting for that event, actually, where angels are coming to the earth. That's actually part of the end times. There is no scripture that says they come before that. There's no scripture that says they can. There's no idea, there's no theology that says angels can, after that first attempt in Genesis, that they could leave at all, even if they wanted to, and come here, or influence, or do anything, or take people. There's nothing in there at all. So we've got to be very, very careful as Christians about that. But those who are non-Christians also have to be very, very careful not to assume that all of a sudden, just because Christians are wrong about something, popular belief, that Christianity is wrong, or that the Bible can't be relied on, or it's some ancient hocus pocus. Anyway, go read Revelation 9. What happens in Revelation 9? You have this event where this abyss, this underworld, this, again, like a Sheol, that's a Hebrew word, or a place of the dead, okay? Or again, the abyss, there's this deep crevice, or a place, again, Enoch. What happened to those angels who did leave heaven and were punished by God? They were sentenced to this place of like a prison. Tartarus, that Peter, he backs that up. The book of Jude now comes into play because he mentions that event. And why would he mention that event thousands of years later? Even this is after Jesus rose from the dead and went to heaven. And why are we talking about that stuff? Why are we talking about angels who came to earth and and now it says evil men have penetrated into your churches? Like, wait a minute. Why is that an important message? Now, maybe because that's what the reality is. So, what is the end game? This UFO phenomenon is revealing itself. It doesn't seem like, to this point, it doesn't seem like human governments or normal folks are going to have any impact in revealing the truth about this UFO stuff. It seems like the UFO phenomenon, the men or whatever behind them themselves are going to choose when it comes out. Thank you very much. It seems like that's where we're at. Maybe something forces their hand. Maybe my country, the United States, has played very nicely and not spilled the beans, but maybe Russia or China will. And that will force things. We'll see. But here's the summary, and here's the possible end game scenarios that we just gamed out there. What's the summary of this whole hypothesis? What the takeaways are? This hypothesis proposes that the UFO phenomenon is not evidence of extraterrestrial life. It is not that would be anti-Christian or anti-Bible. Not saying that. Just saying, as constituted, as the history of the phenomenon through today, the past 100 years, even before that, it doesn't seem like this is an extraterrestrial situation. It is, again, that's what the hypothesis that you're watching and reading right now is saying. It's not extraterrestrials. It's also not spiritual entities. There's more than enough evidence and proof, really, that they are not spiritual entities. Whatever they are, physical things, but not from another world. But instead, the work of a hidden or breakaway civilization of human beings, descended from those who received this hidden knowledge, forbidden knowledge, way back when, from, yes, fallen angels. But since then, it's been all human beings using advanced technology and deception. Remember, you don't have to be an angel or the devil to use deception. Human beings lie all the time. We're really good at it. So they receive forbidden knowledge from the angels, but using this advanced technology and deception, this hidden group seeks to manipulate humanity, the rest of us who don't know, and achieve some form of godhood or being worshipped, or at least being elevated to a point to suit their needs. And they may even believe that they are superior to us because of all this knowledge and because of all the tech that they've obtained. So while potentially speculative, some of this is speculative, yes, but the theory or this hypothesis draws on biblical accounts and historical events to offer an alternative, viable, I believe, alternative explanation for UFOs and related phenomenon. And this is not over. This is just the first skeleton of the idea. It certainly needs further careful consideration of both scriptures in the Bible and the evidence surrounding these mysterious occurrences. And we do have a promise, though. No matter what it is, no matter what the truth of the matter is, the Lord Jesus himself says there is nothing that will not come out. Everything will be revealed. Everything. So disclosure will occur. 100% guaranteed. At what point and through what method? He doesn't say, but it will come out. There is no such thing as a mystery at the end of the day. We will know exactly what happened, why, and who. If this hypothesis is correct, both the Christian world and the non-Christian world will be thrown for a loop. That's putting it nicely. We will both camps, whether you believe as a Christian or you disbelieve as anything else, you are going to be completely turned on your head. You are not going to know where to go. You're not going to know who to ask because no one talked about that. No one planned for this. Everyone thought it was either aliens or demons or everyone's making it up. What if none of those are correct? And if something like this hypothesis is right, we need to make an effort, a conscious, deliberate effort today, starting today, to consider what it would mean to talk amongst leadership in churches and just regular old lay people who are thinking, well, maybe there's something to this and this is a problem. If it was all spiritual demons, if this hypothesis is wrong, and many folks have told me this in the Christian world, if it's just demons and deception and fakery, it's nothing. It means nothing. It does nothing. They have to obey the name of Jesus when you tell them to go away, and they're gone. It's all made up. It's all in your head. It's all some kind of deception. And it's to lead you away from Jesus. That's it. That's basically the bottom line of that theory. I don't think that's nearly adequate for what's actually happening. That doesn't do it. But if it's wrong, shout it from the rooftops. Don't be like the Collins elite or people in the government who apparently think if you don't talk about it, it goes away. Well, that's not true either. If it's all demons and evil spirits and stuff, you definitely should talk about it because they hate the light. They hate being exposed. Expose them. Talk about it all day, every day. If that's really what's happening, if we have demons flying around in the sky or whatever, or taking people from their beds, we got to go to war right now as believers. Don't ignore it. That's the opposite reaction that we should have. And if we're wrong in the other aspect that, yep, this is actually some type of life from another planet. And they're here for who knows what, take over the earth to harvest human beings for our souls, for our bodies, for our energy. Who knows? Our water, our awesome water we have on the earth. I don't know. Well, then we've got to think in very different terms. That's not about deception really at all. It's just that we have another race trying to take over the world that is ours. And that's a whole other thing. But again, I don't think that's where the facts have led. It isn't where the facts have led us. Something more is happening. So don't settle on either of those defaults in the Christian or the non-Christian world. Examine more carefully, and perhaps this hypothesis will bear out to be close to the truth.